10, 9. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to council. It's an incredible room full of friends and helpers from the city. And our two elected members are also with us tonight to watch council tonight. So it's the group of old friends and the group of new friends all gathering together. This is the 37th meeting of the 142nd Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas. And as I said, great to have you here tonight. First of all, is there any disclosures of interest from any of the members? Seeing none, we'll move on to minutes.
I have a motion that the minutes of the meetings held on October 17th and November the 1st, 2022 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Peters.
Questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Council will now resolve itself into committee of the whole to deal with the following business. First committee this evening is strategic direction and development. First item relates to the coordinated collaborative response protocol for responding to reports of encampments. I have a motion that report SESS 1322 related to the City of St. Thomas coordinated collaborative response be received for information. Moved by Councillor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Councillor Burgess.
Well, thank you very much. Well, on receiving the report, I'd like to have Ms. Nielsen start us off if we could, please, so we get the full version tonight. Danielle, thank you for coming out tonight, and please share with us. Yeah, there's a red.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I would like to start by acknowledging that the complexity, humanity, and tragedy of the impact of homelessness on people's lives in St. Thomas is no different from what people are experiencing across all of Canada today. Experiences of homelessness today are the result of deep, historic, system-level errors that have accumulated over decades, such as colonialism and divestments in affordable housing. These, combined with other social inequities such as deep poverty, unresolved intergenerational trauma, an inflated and unaffordable housing market, the current cost of living crisis, the impacts of the pandemic, and these are just to name a few, have cumulatively increased housing instability, including occurrences of homelessness at a higher rate than we have ever seen historically before. As you can imagine, surviving these often co-occurring experiences is not easy. Surviving this often means compromising one's physical or mental health, and sometimes it leads to a dependency on life-altering, highly addictive substances to numb these realities. And this is the reality of some of the experiences of people in our community who we see on our streets in St. Thomas today. As you will likely recall, prior to January of this year, the Inn Out of the Cold operated overnight in the basement of a local church. And more often than not, on any given night, there was capacity for people who needed overnight shelter. In January of this year, the inn relocated to its new address where it could operate 24/7 to better meet the needs of our most vulnerable. Since making this move and being better positioned to meet these needs, the demand for shelter beds in St. Thomas has steadily increased. I want to reassure Council that this is not because other communities are dropping off small or large groups of people experiencing homelessness onto the streets of St. Thomas. We have measures in place on the ground level to support anyone arriving from other communities to help return them to their home communities. Typically, they end up here from other communities of their own accord, and more often than not, they want the support to return home. For example, I can share with you that in September, the inn supported 4 people who were not from St. Thomas. Of the 4 people, 3 were successfully diverted back to their home communities. The increase that we are seeing in the shelter is the result of many factors, including the social inequities which have already been stated, and others that may be less obvious. For example, when the inn operated in the basement of the shelter, it provided overnight shelter only. For people experiencing homelessness, they may not have attended simply because they don't sleep at night. When you're experiencing homelessness, sleeping at night can increase your vulnerabilities and change your sleeping patterns. Now that the shelter operates 24/7, it is better equipped to meet these needs. Additionally, we have worked very hard as a community to identify and set up touch points in multiple areas through our local housing service providers to assist us in identifying people experiencing homelessness, including hidden homelessness, and being better prepared to identify those individuals and match them to supports as needed. And I can assure you that the vast majority of the people accessing our emergency shelter are our neighbors, our friends, and our family. With regard to unsheltered homelessness, this is not only the result of increased demands on our emergency shelter beds. Some of my firsthand experiences with people living unsheltered in St. Thomas have revealed other factors as well, such as needing lower barrier supports that are matched more appropriately to someone's mental health and/or addiction challenges that may result in unpredictable behaviors. Having personal belongings or accumulating personal belongings at a rate that exceeds the shelter's ability to store them. Having a complete desire to live unsheltered, even when housing options are available. Sometimes there's a lack of trust or a sense of insecurity in accessing emergency shelters. And there are times where shelter restrictions are provided, typically in response to a safety concern supporting someone. In the absence of shelter, people may build a makeshift shelter, or what we refer to as an encampment, on public or private land in order to protect themselves and their belongings from elements or for other reasons. And I'd like to take a moment just to share that when we use the term encampment, for some people, you might imagine a very large, crowded, tented area like you'd see in a larger municipality. In St. Thomas, we're often talking about 1 or 2 tents with 1 or 2 occupants. In St. Thomas, encampments on public land are currently not prohibited, and as a result, the City of St. Thomas, through multiple service areas, has collaborated to develop a protocol to respond to reports of encampments. Encampments on private land, however, are subject to the landowner's approval and compliance with all local bylaws. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the coordinated collaborative response, which was also provided to council through a report, provides a step-by-step protocol for responding to reports of encampments. The CCR is not intended to be an emergency response for crisis situations and/or the removal of garbage or debris or concerns and complaints regarding loitering. Nor is it a response intended for immediate removal of an encampment, given the complexities and the humanities that exist for the person living unsheltered. The CCR has been developed to prioritize the safety of everyone involved, including people living unsheltered, people responding to encampments, and the surrounding community. It also operates within existing local bylaws, which holds all people accountable to the same expectations. St. Thomas Elgin Social Services has been involved in the development of the CCR in order to ensure that people living unsheltered have access to supports and services, and to ensure that all participating service areas are informed on the complexities of homelessness. This includes providing funding to CMHA Thames Valley to operate professionalized street outreach services through a team of compassionate people who have mental health and addictions expertise as well. When a report of an encampment is received, street outreach is often the first point of contact with people living unsheltered and a remaining point of contact through relationship and trust building with a focus on housing. This year, St. Thomas Elgin Social Services also funded this team with a rent supplement program of its own, designed to help people move right from the streets into a home of their own. And I'm very pleased to share with you that to date, they have supported 4 people in this way in their journey towards achieving housing stability. Street outreach visits encampments with a focus on building relationship, providing people with support and access to other services, for example, referrals onto our by name list. Street outreach also provides people with a heads up that camping on public land is not currently allowed in St. Thomas, and that the city will be along in the near future requesting them to vacate the area. Once street outreach has confirmed that they attended, and if the person or people remain at the location, bylaw will then attend to provide a notice to vacate the area. The notice generally is issued for the following day at a specific time to give people an opportunity to pack up on their own. Once the day and time provided in the notice has lapsed, bylaw returns with city staff from either parks or roads to ensure the area is clear and returned to its original state. Street outreach may also attend during the cleanup in a supportive function for people. And additionally, St. Thomas Elgin Social Services may also send trained and qualified staff to attend in a supportive role as well. No personal belongings are removed from encampments by city staff unless help is requested by the people living in the encampment or if the items are abandoned. People are encouraged to leave behind anything that they determine is garbage, and staff will remove it once people are done packing up their belongings and have left the area. In the event that people refuse to leave the area after notice has been given, police may be contacted to respond as a trespassing issue. Encampments on private land may be reported to police at any time if landowners are concerned that the person may be trespassing on their land. During each step of the CCR, a minimum of 2 staff attend. At any time, if anyone feels unsafe, all engagement should stop. Any reports or concerns of fire or public safety should be reported to the fire department or police department immediately. And I would just like to highlight again that the street outreach supports remain available regardless of the person's location. The housing focused support that street outreach provides is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. But by way of being mobile, street outreach continues its focus on real solutions for the people they support on any given day in St. Thomas. This includes, again, as an example, the ability to act as a conduit that assists a person to get onto our by name list, which in turn can enact the community response for identifying this person and matching them to housing resources. Next slide, please. This next slide here provides you with a high-level overview of the St. Thomas Elgin by name list, which in many respects is exactly what it sounds like. Through a thoughtful and meaningful referral process, people experiencing homelessness across the spectrum, for example, people who are sheltered, unsheltered, couch surfing, etc., are identified at multiple different touch points and added to the list. The chart to the right identifies the multiple touch points and referral sources in our community. Once added to the by name list, the list is then used to match people to housing resources based on need and the type of housing resources available. To date, since its inception in July of 2020, 410 unique people have been identified. 244 of those people have been housed. 50 went inactive, which means they haven't touched the system in more than 3 months, and 116 remain active today, with 100 being in St. Thomas and the remaining in Elgin County. Each month, approximately 10 to 12 people move from the list into housing. Next slide, please. This slide provides you with a definition of our coordinated access system locally. Coordinated access is a bi-weekly meeting where service providers come together to review the by name list and make matches to available resources. This is a national and international best practice that is helping communities across Canada move the dial on homelessness. And for more information can be found by visiting the link at the bottom of this slide. Next slide, please. I would just like to quickly highlight our recent Built for Zero achievements in St. Thomas Elgin. As you may recall, in early 2021, Council endorsed St. Thomas Elgin Social Services in becoming a Built for Zero community. Built for Zero, for anyone who may not know, is a national campaign and movement that supports communities in implementing best practices to drive down the numbers of people experiencing homelessness with the goal of reaching functional zero. Built for Zero currently prioritizes veterans experiencing homelessness and chronic homelessness. This slide provides Council with a timeline that demonstrates our Built for Zero achievements that led us to achieving our first reduction milestone of reducing chronic homelessness by 10% in July of 2020. And in fact, in the month of July, our reduction had reached 25%. As with all data in homelessness, this is a fluid number that will look different month over month, but all reductions, no matter how big or small, are worth celebrating. Next slide, please. Looking ahead, what I want to emphasize most is that we still have lots of work ahead of us. Over the last few years, St. Thomas has embarked on incredible work and showed great commitment to investing in and implementing real solutions that solve homelessness. In fact, I recently had the opportunity to attend the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness Conference, which is a national conference that brings people together all across the country to learn from one another. And the work in St. Thomas to end homelessness got an honorable mention more than once. Our recent work with Indwell to develop low barrier housing for people in our community living with the highest acuity is a shining example of this great work. This particular example, the Railway City Lofts, just celebrated its 1-year anniversary, and after 1 year of operating, we now know that it works. Railway City Lofts has seen remarkable successes not only in housing stability, but in the quality of lives for the people it serves. And St. Thomas isn't stopping there. This spring, we look forward to opening the doors on Indwell's second build with full tenancy selection through our by name list, and we can predict using our current data that this will result in further milestone reductions being achieved. But more importantly, it will result in real solutions for ending homelessness in the lives of our most vulnerable neighbors, family, and friends. We are also a collaborative community of service providers that are committed to continually working together to maximize and optimize our existing resources, including thinking outside the box in how we create more lower barrier spaces and new ways of accessing supports. I would like to close with emphasizing that the solution to homelessness is housing, and housing with supports. It is not emergency shelter or responding to reports of encampments. While these are important elements in our current work today to respond to homelessness in St. Thomas, we need to ensure that we continue prioritizing and expediting the building and operating of housing as the ultimate solution to solving homelessness, until we reach a place where no one lives unsheltered and very few beds are ever needed at any given time. I welcome any of Council's thoughts, suggestions, or questions about the information that was provided in this presentation. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Ms. Nielsen, thank you so much. And thank you for representing us at the National Conference also. Any questions from members on the report? Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Danielle. Excellent presentation for us. You just gave a kind of a definition that the solution to homelessness is housing. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel for this to happen in our community in the next 2 years, 5 years?
Thank you very much for your question, Councillor. Yes, there is lots of light on the horizon for our community. Our data currently demonstrates that what we're doing is working. And with our most recent reduction, that would indicate that, in fact, we are on the right track. The data that we have available and the new units coming online through the second build through Indwell has already been crunched, for lack of a better word, and would show that we will experience another significant reduction in our community. And we just need to keep going with that momentum.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler.
Thank you, Worship. I too want to thank you for the report. It was very enlightening, and I'm really glad that you touched on the successes that you've had as staff. And it is great to see that the work that everybody's doing is being recognized nationally, even with the success that we had. And I'm really glad that you talked about the buses not dropping people off, because I think one of our criticism is because we have been doing so well and being successful at this, people are now saying, oh yeah, because we're doing so much and investing taxpayers' money, people are now dropping their people off here, which isn't true. And I'm glad you touched on that. And I think also we have to do is look at other communities that are faced with the same rumors of that happening. So, but just want to thank you for all the work that you guys are doing. It's proven to be successful, and looking forward to the new build coming on and reducing the homelessness and helping people even more.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Clark, then Councillor Rymal.
Thank you. Through you to Danielle or the city manager, I'm not sure. The 45 units will come open in the spring, and I'm just wondering, we had talked about further development and our next project after that. I'm just wondering if we're still in the planning stages or where we're at with the next 45 beds.
City manager, or look, I'll give you my views if you want, because I'll tell you, this council has been fantastic at getting this far. I cannot see us getting through this next year without us planning for the next 60 Indwell beds that we need, the building we need for it. But as we're seeing with Queen Street, it takes a full court press effort from all levels of our departments, but also the provincial government and the federal government. And we will continue to do it as we attend and speak with our ministers. We'll make sure that that's the case. But I think that the people of St. Thomas sent this council back for a purpose, for a reason. That we're on a good path. Let's work towards it and let's make sure we can do it and make it as fiscally responsible as we can make it, but that it's a number one priority. I can't think of somebody being homeless not being the first priority that this council has to look at. So thank you, Councillor Clark, for asking, but as fast as this council decides it can. And we're about to go into budget as we move into the new council, and I'm certain that this will be a topic of conversation. I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
No. No.
Okay.
no. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Reimel?
Thanks, Danielle. I just wanted to say it's a wonderful report. And I think the key thing is the collaboration. You know, you've got at least 6 services working together so that everybody has an idea of what everybody's doing. And I think that's key, you know, that everybody's got their finger on the pulse. And I love your flow chart, you know, it looks great. And that's the thing, is having some kind of baseline, because there's so many unpredictable things that happen as well. But you're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Baldwin-Sands?
Thank you. First, I would like to once again thank you for this report. It's very detailed and it describes the complexity and the compound problems that we've had Canada-wide. And thank you for bringing that to the attention first, and then drilling it down to the layers of our city resources that are required and the different city departments that are all brought in together to create that collaborative piece. So again, hats are off to you. I also wanted to point out the attention that you did in the report to public health and public safety. And I was really impressed when I was reading that in the report itself. I also appreciated what you said about the evidence-based solutions and how St. Thomas is a beacon out there for other municipalities, whether same size, whether larger, whether they're smaller, but bringing that attention and focus to the city of St. Thomas for the work that we are doing that is evidence-based, based upon what the experts are bringing back to the table. So I wanted to thank you about to that as well. One of the things that I didn't see in the report, and it's something that I always talk to you about, is the continuous support that we have from volunteers in this community and the staff as volunteers and the volunteers themselves, because without them, a lot of the things that we do as a city would not be possible. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that for me, please.
Sure. Thank you very much for your comments and question, Councillor. St. Thomas is an incredibly generous community where people offer their personal time and personal resources to address critical matters without even being asked. And I am regularly inspired by the work that I see in our community through grassroots organizations like the Grace Cafe and the Nameless, a number of different working groups in our community, like our food providers. And at the risk of naming some, I always put myself at risk of forgetting some, but there is a wealth of volunteer resource in terms of time, compassion, commitment right across this community. And we couldn't do what we do without them.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Thank you. I appreciate your mentioning all of those volunteers, and truly do. I have supported what has happened and coming up and how this has emerged, grown, and how you have been systematically working at addressing the homeless issue in this community. And I want you to know that I will continue to do those supports around this table. And thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Further questions or comments on receiving the report? Councillor Peters.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. Can you go back to slide 3, please? Can you explain the active cases? What troubles me, it appears that we are being asked to pick up pieces and deal with individuals in active cases that should be dealt with by CMHA and the ACT team. I look at some of those orange lines on there, and the CMHA is provincially funded, a provincial organization. The ACT teams are provincially funded, a provincial organization. Why are we having to deal with, why is CMHA not dealing with their own clients?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. It would be challenging for me to be able to give you a precise answer on behalf of CMHA in terms of how they deliver their service provisions. I can share with you that the data represented on this slide has more to do with the state of housing or homelessness of an individual versus their mental health or addictions needs. I can also share with you that we do partner with CMHA around collaborative issues. And I think there's a general feeling that all service providers, given that we're in a crisis, may be needing to respond in different ways or at a faster rate. But I would be challenged to answer that question for you. I'd be happy to take it back.
I would appreciate you taking it back, because the funding that they have, they should be utilizing their own funding. We shouldn't be expected as a municipality to be investing significant sums of money in housing and creating transitional housing. So I'll leave it at that, and I look forward to hearing the answer back. I think all my colleagues would as well too. Next question would be, how many people do we have living in the community right now in an unsheltered environment, i.e. a tent?
On any given day, the data provided to our office through our street outreach team would indicate that it's approximately 10.
Okay. You talked about the process that we go through in working with them, the individuals, and trying to find them a place to go as they leave their tent. But are these funds, Your Worship, budgeted for? Or are we just utilizing existing budgets to do these cleanups? Because I've seen some of these cleanups, and that's just for city land. I think I've also witnessed a private landowner having to clean up a substantial amount of debris left behind on their property, and they've had to eat that. But perhaps this is a Sandra question, are we dipping into budgets, or are these is this just part of a general operational budget? I still have another question. Thank you.
Go to you, Sandra, or City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the councillors. I think it's probably fair to say that right now, given the nature and the need to try to support the issue as best as possible, we are using existing operating funds and trying as best as we can to try to keep that within budget. The challenge will be, as we have more encampments, more need to move it forward, we may be in a situation where we would be using money in excess of what we have in the budget. So to be clear, right now we're managing it. We are also looking at this as part of the 2023 budget moving forward.
Thank you. My final question would be, is this a complaint-driven process that we deal with? So I'll use an example today of a tent that has appeared on city land on the Mackenzie Trail. I know a complaint went in, but do city staff, if we have, I'll say park staff, I see park staff go up and down the trail regularly picking up waste, etc. So if city staff is out and they see that an encampment has been created, do we then put that into the system to then begin the process, or are we relying on a citizen to put a complaint in?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Members of the public or employees of the City of St. Thomas are able to report an observation of an encampment by way of either the internal system where participating service providers are collaborating and working together, or by sending that report through to customer service. So I can share with you on a weekly basis, the reports that we receive into the St. Thomas Elgin Social Services are a combination of both. It's public administrative staff as well as members of our community.
Thanks. My final question is, what is the capacity at the inn right now?
Thank you for the question. I don't have their capacity on hand today, but I can tell you on average, they have been closer to being at full capacity than in previous experiences with the shelter. The challenge is that the number is fluid. People are moving in and out of the shelter beds at a regular rate. And so each day that capacity changes. I can share with you that the inn has committed to looking at how to create lower barrier spaces that still allow people access to the inn, whether it's for food or warmth, even if a bed is not available, and then prioritizing individuals for those beds as they become available.
Thanks. My final question is, do we need, as a council and the community, start thinking of plans B and C?
Thank you, Councillor. Would you mind elaborating on what you mean by Plan B
Well,
and
if we
C?
have an inn that is very close to capacity,
Mhm.
we have a rising number of tents in the community. The weather is turning cold. If there's no room in the inn, how are we going to continue to support these individuals? And do we need to start looking at a Plan B or a Plan C?
Thank you. I very much appreciate that question, and I'm happy to share with you that St. Thomas Elgin Social Services is leading on conversations with our existing service providers, looking at what those solutions, or as you define Plan B, might look like in our community. We're aware that it needs to move quickly, so we are moving quickly. I'm not in a position to provide greater detail or a presentation on what that might look like, but I am happy to share with you that we're engaging in those conversations. If I might, I would also share that the hope is that by continuing to expedite our housing projects and matching people directly from our by name list and from our housing community, the intention is to reduce the demand for need on emergency shelter beds in hopes that next year we're not in this place. And each year after that, we require less and less emergency shelter beds.
Councillor Clark, did I see your hand again?
It's been answered. I was
Great,
worried about Plan B.
right? Ms. Nielsen, thank you to you and to your staff. Please, first of all, pass on from this council. Thank you for where we're at today. As Councillor Peters just said, there's a number of other coordinated city groups that work with us, CMHA that provide housing and a number of others. And we know that your job of coordinating that plus the city's response is a fair bit of work. And we thank you for representing this council well as we try to move forward to Build for Zero. You're our guidance. So thank you very much. Councillor
Thank you,
Herbert, did
Mayor.
you have another question?
Yes, just one last question. I hope the public's listening to what you're saying tonight, that there is something being done. I get people say, you're not doing it, you're not doing it. Yes, you are doing something. You're working at it. You have a game plan. You got all the teams involved and you're working on top, getting on top of it. So thank you very much. I just want the public to know that there is something being done and there's teeth put into it. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your worship, the next item relates to your new service agreement for homelessness prevention program. I have a motion that report SCSS 1222 related to the new homelessness prevention program service agreement be received for information, and further that council approve entering into new homelessness prevention program service agreements with approved homelessness prevention program recipients, and further that bylaws be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute new homeless prevention program service agreements with homelessness prevention program recipients as approved by council and the homelessness prevention program investment plan. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands. Seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, worship. I noticed it says that the expenditures are funded by the province. Do we have to apply for that every year or is that something just comes automatically to us?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ms. Nielsen answer that question for us too, because I believe it's a set every year, but we don't know how many years, so.
Yes, thank you very much for the question, Counselor. It is set every year and we are informed by the ministry each year what our allocation will be.
Thank you. Just
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Next.
Next item relates to notice being received from the municipality of Central Elgin. Notice of passing of an official plan and zoning bylaw amendments in the Eagle Ridge Phase 2 area designed to redesignate certain lands from natural hazard and natural heritage to residential and to address lot layouts on lands not previously in the developer's ownership in the Eagle Ridge Phase 2 development. Your worship, there's no further items unless there are any items from the members. Seeing none, we'll now move into community engagement and services. First item relates to the 2022 Downtown Development Board tree lighting ceremony road closure. Have motion that report ES 7022 relating to the road closure be received for information. And further, the council approve the temporary closing of Mondayman Street between the north limit of Talbot Street and the south limit of Curtis Street on Friday, November the 18th, 2022, between the hours of 5:30 PM and 7:30 PM. Moved by Councillor Rimal, seconded by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? A reminder of the tree lighting. It was a reminder of me today when the bucket truck went by putting the lights on the Christmas tree. It was, I went, wow, I don't often see someone right outside the office window. So it's looking forward to the 18th. Santa will arrive at sometime after 5:30 on, I believe, the St. Thomas Fire Department's bringing him to town. And then, of course, all the kids and some free hot chocolate and a bunch of other stuff on the tree lighting. And of course, the next night is the Santa Claus parade. And I hope you're all ready for that too. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the outdoor ice rink installation. I have a motion that report PR 1922 relating to the outdoor ice rink installation be received for information. And further, the council direct staff to provide oversight to the Doug Terry Homes Volunteer Group for the operation of an outdoor ice rink on city-owned land. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Rimal.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
Thanks, your worship. To Jeff, I forwarded on an email to you from an individual that was interested in getting involved in a rink. Is there any opportunities that you see potentially to have more than one outdoor rink this upcoming winter?
Spray.
Thank you, Mayor Preston, through you to Councillor Steve. At this time, we're just putting costs together. I believe you requested a report to council fleshing out the cost for these things. I hope to have this to council next month. We don't have the operational cost together. There's also, we'd have to work with the fire department to work out sites, flooding and site locations. I did reach out to that individual. I have not heard back from him yet.
Great. Look, I found it quite unique that I put my shorts on and sat out on the on a chair reading the ice rink report this week when it was warm enough to sit out that way. You know, this is an incredible November. And so as we get into winter, let's hope that we can come up with Councillor Peters some more locations for some ice rinks. But I will take the weather we've had today for as long as it wants to bring it. All right. Thank you. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the purchase of a fire department replacement vehicle. I have a motion that report FD 0422 relating to the purchase of a fire department replacement vehicle be received for information. And further, council authorized staff to proceed with a single source procurement of a demo fire truck. Moved by Councillor Wookie, second by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, worship. So, evening, David, how are you? Good, good. I'm going to assume that you put a new pumper in for the budget for next year, correct? So if this is approved tonight, you would be taking that out of your budget for next year?
Absolutely. So we
So-
put it in for next year's budget. Hopefully we could get away with what we have. And like it says in the report, we're dealing with a 2001 to 2004 pumper. So we have 2 trucks that could possibly go out of service. Both these trucks are, the one shouldn't even be frontline truck. So due to supply and demand, cost, build out time, St. Thomas has always been in a good shape of doing custom builds. We've always put out the tenders and went with one of the companies we're using right now, E1. We put out the build and waited 6 to 8 months for a truck to be built. Now we're looking at 24 months. Companies like Freightliner and International aren't taking any orders for chassis for 2 years. So if we miss out on getting something that's a stock truck, we may be in some deep water looking for trucks. Sure, there's going to be trucks out there that they build, the companies build for stock trucks, but they're hit and miss. Are they what we want? The truck that I put into this report meets the standards what we need in St. Thomas. It's very similar to what we have. We have the luxury in St. Thomas of having 2 aerial trucks, 2 pumpers. For the simple fact is, if we go out the door and worst case scenario, the truck does not run for some reason or is faulty, we just switch over and climb in the truck that sits next to it, which is identical as twin to what we have, and we respond. It doesn't cut into our response time. Last thing we want is to not be able to respond to our residents in timely fashion.
Councillor Herbert?
Thank you. Follow-up question. So if for some reason we didn't approve this tonight, what would the cost for a new one be in your 23 budget?
So what's available here right now that's, and these are Canadian trucks that are available for us, not anything that's in the United States. There's a Safe Tech truck and a Rosenbauer and stuff. So we're looking anywhere from 1.2 to like $900,000. So your difference of, $150,000 to $400,000 in difference in price.
So, and you haven't seen the truck physically yet. I see in the report that they're flying you out there for.
Have seen pictures, interior, exterior dimensions, and they're holding this truck. Usually they won't hold a truck. The days of putting a down payment down and saving a truck or just are gone. Those days don't exist anymore because of supply and demand. We look at what just happened in Florida. There was a department that lost 6 of their trucks because of the hurricane. They don't have 6 trucks, so they're reaching out, finding trucks. There was a couple of trucks that are available for Philadelphia that we were inquiring of, and they didn't last. So we're not under the gun, but I mean, it's just fiscally responsible, like to go and look at something, at least look at something like this.
Yep.
If it isn't what we want, then it isn't what we want. Then it's plan B. You're welcome.
Further questions for the chief, Councillor Clark and then Councillor Rymal?
I think it's a prudent option, and it should save us money if it indeed looks as good as it is. More just a question of interest. If we purchase the truck, how does it get to St. Thomas?
That's a great question. Do you have your GZ license? So a couple of options, and this isn't, we'll probably flatbed it back. We'll put it either on rail to somewhere that we can drive it to. So they'll probably put it on a rail, and that's speaking with the guys from Pierce. The gentleman I'm dealing with at Pierce were in the process of receiving the truck that was purchased a couple of years ago. So it's just coming now. It was done in 2020 or 2021 when the aerial. So it's the same company. They will look after us. Worst case scenario, if that can't happen, then we will have a sign up list that you'll get every guy in the fire department want to go out and bring it back. It's not the ideal thing. So we'll look at rail it back on a flatbed and then to an area that we can at least go and pick it up at that point.
Councillor Rymal?
Thanks. Mine probably is similar to Councillor Clark's, because on the last line of the report, it said the cost will be funded by the fire department budget, although the expenses will be refunded by the supplier if the truck is purchased. So is that the expenses of the getting, like this committee going out to look at it and then transporting it back?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that'll cover myself and 2 members of the truck committee. So St. Thomas has always established a truck committee. members of the fire department to sit in with the chief and the deputy of the day because we're removed from driving and what the firefighters need. So we create a truck committee, and that truck committee consists of either 2 or 3. And right now we have 2 that do the specs and tell us what we need. And this is what the latest trends are. This is where we're moving in the future. So it would be ideal for myself and the 2 members of the truck committee to go out and have a look at it. And if we purchase it, the company reimburses us for all our expenses. The worst case scenario is if we get out there and it's not what we want, then we would absorb the cost of at least trying to save that amount of money.
Councillor Herbert?
Sorry, Rich, just one last quick question. Is the end of a life of a truck based on mileage or based on years?
So that's a great question. So the Underwriters Laboratory and NFPA states that after 15 years, that truck's supposed to be shelved. And then as a frontline truck, you can continue to use that truck as a back line, an emergency only. And what happens is after a certain length of time, it has to have a yearly inspection. And then if you get to a point where somebody comes in and then says it's not reliable, you can't use it anymore, then you lose a little bit of money or a lot of money selling it to a volunteer department, putting it on gov deals and things like that. So right now we are running these trucks, and the great members at Board of Works keep them running for us, but they're getting to the point where we're starting to do a lot of repairs. And so it's like anything else, they're 20 some odd years old. So like the Underwriters Laboratory and NFPA says, 15 years, and they should start being backline truck, and you should rotate them through. So we've had the luxury of rotating the 2 trucks through their life cycle. We'll run pump 6, pump 1, and we've been rotating around just to try to, extend the life of these trucks and how they run for us.
Good, thank you.
Further questions or comments? On the report? Those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. You're very welcome.
Your worship, unless there are any further items for this committee, we'll now
Seeing
move
none.
into infrastructure and civic operations. First item relates to traffic signal and connectivity improvement project. This would be phase 1 in various locations. I have a motion that report ES 7422 relating to the traffic signal and connectivity improvement project, phase 1 at various locations, tender award be received for information, and further that the tender submitted by Armstrong Paving and Materials Group Limited in the amount of $522,122.63, excluding HST, be accepted. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Rymal.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. I was very pleased to see that the Sunset Drive and entrance to Parkside is now on the list to get one. I think that's been a topic of conversation with people, students going across the school and coming back. So I was glad to see you guys do that. So I don't know if it was a last minute decision or something that you just felt that it needed to be done. That's just complimenting you on it.
Well, Mr. Lawrence, would you like to just comment on it?
Sure, yeah, we brought it up the priority list because we want to rebuild Parkside Drive next year. And so when we do that, we'll need to close off Parkside to Elm Street. And so this allows a little bit more traffic to go through this intersection. So it's a good thing to bring it forward. And at the same time, we can pull out the old pedestrian crossing signal and reuse it somewhere else.
Good, thank you for me.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Councillor Wookie.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lawrence, you and I were just talking about this before the meeting about at Forest Ave and Fairview, which is not on the list, but is that something that we think might appear in a future budget, or will that be grouped together, do you think, sometime in the future with a few other projects to get a better unit price? Thank you.
Mr. Lawrence?
Thanks. Yeah, it's a good question. That's why we have the phase 1 labeled to this. We wanted to start with a batch of them, get this project completed, and then contemplate the next phase after that. So likely that one would be part of the second phase. And it's likely that one to be the same as Elm and Park, which is the IPS, which is a green, amber, red scenario. So that's the highest specification for the crossings.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Are there any opposed? It's carried.
No further items for this committee unless there are any items.
Councillor Peters has something.
Thanks, your worship, to Justin. Couple meetings back, you weren't here, and Nathan addressed it. But in all my time on council, I've never had so many calls and emails about parking in the downtown. And I've tried to explain to people, and I know the mayor had got one of the calls too. That, you know, with all the work that's going on over here, we've lost a lot of parking on St. Catherine lot. The park being redeveloped across the street, we've had to redeploy for city employees. When the dust settles on all these projects, is that going to free up some of these parking spaces in some of these other places? You know, I know it's part of the city's policy that we don't require new builds downtown to provide parking for their tenants, but tenants want parking. They're prepared to pay for permits, but permits aren't available because, you know, in some cases they are being displaced because we've got to deal with city vehicles. And the other question was that I had the old, what I call the city works yard parking lot on Scott Street. There's all kinds of empty land back in there. And is there a way that we can do some things to deal with some of the parking issues? But as I say, I know the mayor got an earful because I got an earful from the same individual. But it's to say, I think it's because of all the construction, but is this going to go away once some of these projects are completed?
Mr. Lawrence, and I know you and I have had lots of conversations in the last week about letting people know that we're coming up on November 15th when a parking permit may be needed to be on the street. So if I can use this opportunity to also share that with people at home, take a look at your parking situation. But when snow starts to fall, hopefully not by November 15th, but that, well, your parking permit will be more needed. Mr. Lawrence?
So I think your first question was about the supply and demand of parking. And yes, there will be more that returns back in. So Upper St. Catharines, as we call it, is above the new daycare, and that will come back online. So that will allow some staff parking to go back there, and obviously daycare parking there as well. Library will get more again as the new park opens up. So Westlake Evans, as it opens, there'll be quite a few spots in there still. So that'll open up again. Your comment about adding to Scott Street's good. In theory, we could expand it, the gravel lot into that back little section. And I would just add that the council always has the ability to alter the ratio between 2-hour and permit spots. And I think you did take that opportunity about 6 months ago to make a slight adjustment, which allows more, in theory, upper residential to have permit spots. But the downside is it takes away from the 2-hour, and commercial uses don't normally like that 2-hour.
Thank you. Further questions or comments on this one? Councillor Clark.
Just the project on Scott Street, the new expansion there, is parking being provided to the tenants there? Or will that be a new pressure on our parking lots?
Mr. Lawrence, do you know the answer on the new building on Scott Street? Can we get back to Councillor Clark then? Yeah. Great. Other questions or comments? Seeing none? Thank you. Councillor Clark, did you have an item? Oh, no, we didn't have to vote on it because it was just, yeah. But sorry, Councillor Baldwin-Sands.
Thank you. This is for Mr. Lawrence as well, please. It's in regards to leaf collection. With this lovely weather that we've been having, it's provided some of our citizens then greater opportunity to collect leaves and some of their garden waste, et cetera. I understand until November 25th, we could leave our leaves in paper bags or bundles during our regular pickup time. I was hoping you could expand on that for the residents, please.
Great. It's going on. Let's tell people.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's you've hit the schedule exactly. So there's 3 weeks remaining in leaf pickup, and that goes out on the day that you'd normally put out your waste. If you're not sure, people can check the waste calendar or check on the city website, and it shows that. Sometimes during collection, GFL will use different types of trucks.
Right.
So they can pick up with their various, they have a number of different ones. It doesn't mean that it's going to the garbage. What happens is that whether they collect it in the side or the back, it gets packaged in that truck and taken as compost. So I know we've heard that concern, you know, are my leaves going to the garbage? And no, they're not. They're getting collected and they're going to compost.
Great. Further questions? And I wanted to thank Councilor-elect Gibson for last week bringing that up in a big way, that this is the week for your green bin, your leaf waste, and what a beautiful weekend it would have been to be out raking if that's what you're into. Further questions? Seeing none, next topic.
There's no further items under this committee. We'll now move into corporate governance and administration. First item relates to the 2023 council meeting schedule. I have a motion that report CC 1422 relating to the 2023 council meeting schedule be received for information, and further that the January 3rd, 2023 council meeting be canceled, and further that the regular council meetings for the summer be scheduled for Monday, July 17th and Monday, August 14th, 2023. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Burgess.
Discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the 2021 audited consolidated financial statements. Your worship, we also have Christine Scrimgeour here, but I will read the motion before she makes a presentation. I have a motion that report TR 1822 relating to the 2021 audited consolidated financial statements be received for information, and further the council approve the draft consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021. And further, the council approved the draft financial statement for the City of St. Thomas Trust Funds for the year ended December 31st, 2021. And further, the council authorized the mayor to sign the audit findings letter on behalf of the city council members. Moved by Councillor Rymel, seconded by Councillor Burgess.
Great to have you back.
Thank you.
Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Your Worship. All right, you have the draft financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2021 before you. I will go through them like I normally do. Please don't hesitate to ask me any questions, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them. I'll start off by thanking the Treasury staff for their help through this audit process. We still were in a bit of a COVID predicament throughout this past year. And so you can imagine we do an audit both on site and through portals and the like. And so it's always a little bit challenging. So I just want to thank them for that. These financial statements are called consolidated because they are consolidated for the following items. So I do prepare separate financial statements for the Downtown Business Board, the second. In addition to those entities, these statements are consolidated your percentage ownership of the Elgin primary water supply system and the Southwest public health system. And then as well, you do have an investment in Integris from when you sold your hydro a few years back. And so all of those items are consolidated in these financial statements as we go through them. The first 2 pages are the auditor's independent report. Sorry, I'm just going to get used to this mouse here a little bit. Maybe. Sorry about this. What are you doing, hitting this? There we go. Okay, we're on it. So this is my independent auditor's report. It is a clean audit opinion, which means that I have not found anything materially incorrect in the financial statements. Materiality for the city is 1.6 million. However, that doesn't mean I just look at items over 1.6 million. We statistically sample into all of your systems, being your revenue, your purchase system, and then your payroll system. And having done all that work, each item that flows through the city's books is eligible for that statistical sampling as well. When we go through the balance sheet at the year end, we do reduce that materiality to look at things like subsequent payments and receipts to make sure the cutoff is proper. And so then the financial statements are dated as of today's date, which is hopefully those charged with governance under the Canadian auditing standard, being this council approves these statements and they can be finalized. So getting into the numbers, this is the consolidated statement of financial position. This is better known probably as your balance sheet. And as I've mentioned to council before, the line that I look at most or to see where the city has ended up at the end of the year is this net financial assets. So that would be the amount of money the city would have in the bank at the end of the day. And this again is of December 31st, 2021. If everybody paid you what they owed you and you paid off all of your liabilities. And I always look to see that this is increasing, and you can see there's been approximately $1 million increase there from 2020 to 2021. Everything below that line are assets that you need to have in place to provide the services that you provide. And so tangible capital assets would be the largest number there, as you can see, and that has increased by about 21 million. I'll make a couple comments on that. We did that. There's a lot of new capital assets completed in 2021. A lot of that was supply chain issues and the like in 2020 and 21. And so we got caught up a lot on our capital projects. We did not issue any new debt this year. So we did all of that new capital assets without issuing new debt. We did take some money out of reserve funds to help and reserves to help fund that. And amortization, so that's the using up of assets that we'll get to in the next statement, was 16 million. So in total, you added about $37 million of new assets in 2021, which is a significant amount. Of that, about 6 million was what's called assumed assets, which is where we assume subdivisions once the development is done, and we then assume those assets and are responsible in the future to continue the maintenance on those assets. Coming down to accumulated surplus at the end of the year, 458 million. That of that, you can see 444 million, 445 million is all in capital assets. So it's not like you have that kind of money in the bank. Any questions on that balance sheet at all? Okay. The next statement is your statement of operations and accumulated surplus. This is a 3-column approach. So you should show your 2021 budget, the actual 2021 compared to the actual 2020. I will make a couple comments. I mentioned at the beginning that we consolidate the health unit and the Erie Primary or Elgin Primary Water Board. And so you can see that we will get down into some areas where the budget to actual looks a little off. And that's not because you did not, your city staff did not budget properly. It's that we don't budget for our share of those items. That shows up specifically in the government grant line, the 49 million budget versus 55 million actual. Most of that is the grant money that is received within the health unit, that the majority of the revenue in that health unit is grants. And so that is where that shows up. Under expenditures, we did not overspend by $23 million. 2 items show up in that actual column. One is the amortization. So that's that using up of assets that I mentioned before of 16 million. So part of that difference between the actual and the budget total expenditures is that 16 million, as well as the expenditures for both the health unit and that water system that you consolidate but don't budget for. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. Under other, excuse me, other revenue, I see we budgeted 2,500, but I made a note that we got 135,000. How did we, such a big discrepancy?
So we don't budget for things like donations. So if any kind of ratepayers donate towards assets, or we, that's usually the major one is donations. So we do get some donation revenue through the year.
So if it comes, it comes. Okay, thank
But
you.
we can't budget for it because we have no
That's
idea.
fine, but it was a good thing. So thank you.
Yes. Going in the right direction for sure. I will mention the one line item that does flow through down to the bottom, that taxation revenue. You can see we budgeted at 59 million and we only had 57, just under 58 million. We did have a significant amount of write-offs this year. So that's where we do get assessment changes from the province. MPAC again through 2020 was pretty slow on the assessing, as you can imagine, through COVID. That got caught up this year. And so when we're on the balance sheet, you'll notice taxes receivable have gone down significantly. That's because a lot of old accounts were cleaned up, or not cleaned up, but written off because that impact finally gave the approval to do that. And so when we come down to, what am I doing wrong here? When we come down to this net line here, that 2 million, that's really flows through down to that line. We in fact had about a $17,000 surplus, if you can believe. So on $149 million of revenue, we budgeted so close that we were about $17,000 of surplus. So pretty close budget to actual, and that's I don't see that very often, so that's great. Everything below that line are revenues and expenditures that are not part of your general operations. So it's either capital asset funding, so that's provincial grants, and you can see there we had significantly more grants this year than we have had in the past. Again, because we were able to finish those projects, we were able to recognize those grants. Developing and other contributions related to capital, the 13 million, which is the large numbers showing there. The next one is where those assumed assets. So we add them to our assets, and then we add the revenue as a contribution to the city. And as I said, the maintenance of those assets going forward is your responsibility. So it was a very busy year. There's $26 million of revenue there that in excess of operations. Coming down to that accumulated surplus at the end of the year that we saw on the balance sheet. Any questions on that statement? I know there's a lot of numbers there, but I think I've hit the highlights.
Councillor Wookie? Well, I'm on.
Is that because of me? No?
Oh, there, I'm good. Just a question, you might not have got there yet, but I'll ask it while it's on my mind about amortization schedules in general as an auditor. Do municipalities vary much in how far out they amortize debt? Or is there some requirement that it's 25 years or whatever happens to be? I was just thinking about, do you see often that municipalities might say, look, we want to make some money available, so we want to retire our debt slower and amortize out further. Does that happen, or is it pretty standard across municipalities, how they amortize debt?
So
Thank
the
you.
amortization that I was talking about is the amortization of capital assets. Amortization of debt is set by the lender typically. So where we take out what's called debentures in the municipal world, you'd call it your mortgage, but in the municipal world, it's called debentures. Whoever we have borrowed the money from, and usually it's the provincial Ontario infrastructure funding, they set the limits. You are governed by the ARL, which is set by the province after they've reviewed your FIR each year. That's your annual repayment limit. So they want to keep that within a certain percentage of your overall revenues. And so you're notified each year of what that is, and you have to stay within that or you would be offside with the province. You're welcome. Okay, I'll continue on. I won't go through all these next statements in detail. I do want to go to this one here, which shows the level of, whoops, I'm a little trigger happy here. Shows the level of activity for the capital. So there's where you see just under 16 million, 15.9 million of amortization. So that's the using up of assets. And what I want to see in a municipality is that you're replacing those assets at least equal to that amortization, because that would then mean that you're staying current with your assets. And I'll remind council that that amortization is on historical cost. So you really do want to see your acquisition of new assets in excess of that amortization to take account of things like inflation. And you have definitely met that criteria as you see the acquisition of tangible capital assets of just that 37 million that I mentioned before. So significant changes in your assets this year for sure. And a lot of activity on your staff because of that. These are your notes to your financial statements, which are standard notes you'll see in every municipality. And I just want to get to the one note on your surplus, which I think is probably the note that your council would be the most interested in getting there. Here. Oops, now I've gone too far now. Anyway, what's that? Now I've done it.
Go to the top.
I see.
Complicated here.
It shouldn't be that complicated.
You know which number?
Yeah, note number 9. So it's note number 9 in your financial statements, which breaks down the surplus. And there's just a couple things I want to comment on that. Should be the next one. One more. Yeah, it is slow, isn't it? I don't know why I can't. Sorry. One more page. There we go. Whoops.
Oh, sorry.
It's not working. It isn't me, is it?
No.
Thank you.
Not-
Oh, maybe it's slowing it down. Gotcha. There we go. All right.
I knew
I'll just keep talking here. So the investment in Integris did go up, as I mentioned, and we did receive the dividend in excess of the 550,000, which we then move over to the internal debenture that we had when we made that transaction. I did want to talk about the unfunded employee benefits. So this is the amount that you will owe in future dollars for the WSIB, the health benefits that are due to employees after their retirement. And so you can see there was a significant, we had a new valuation done, and because of the cost of inflation, as you're all aware, has gone up. That's becoming a significant, I mean, it was a significant number before, but it increased by 1.8 million. So I just want to keep that in front of council. So what that means is that over the next number of years, we will have to pay those employee benefits out. It's obviously not something in any one given year, but it does have to be paid out over those years. So that just keeping that in front of council. And then that unfunded investment in Integris, as I mentioned, we paid off another $600,000 of that this year. Then general surplus of 17,000 was moved over to the infrastructure reserve. So reserves have decreased by about 7 million there, and that is the using up of those reserves to fund all of that capital that we had this year. Again, those will be replenished in the future years. This was a year to get caught up on some capital projects, and that was all budgeted for. The reserve fund increases mainly in the area of environmental services, so your water and wastewater, those systems are zeroed out at the end of the year. So any surplus within those systems is moved over to the reserve funds to be used for those systems and not for general activity operations. And other than that, I don't have a lot to say on the remainder of the notes. You also in your packages have your trust fund financial statements, which you have a trust fund at Valley View Home, which is the residents' spending money accounts that they have, and we audit those, as well as the library has a family bequest that came in several years ago from the Wren family that is a trust fund as well. So the two of those are in your packages, or those two show up in your trust fund package.
Just a question back on page 15, that was the accumulated surplus.
Sure.
The figure for the unfunded investment in Integris, and we paid down another 600,000. Is that our choice as to what that amount is going to be in the year? Because the dividend was higher than that. So we've obviously made a choice of using the rest of the dividend somewhere else.
Yes, so the policy is that anything over 550,000 is moved against this investment. Just check with your treasurer to be sure I had that number right. Yes, and that's been consistent since that happened. So yes, the actual dividend was over $1 million. All right, that's all I had to say unless there's anything else, anyone? You're good? All right, thank you.
Do we want to reread the motion, or we have already moved and seconded? We've had our discussion. Okay, let's go there. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Perfect.
Next item relates to the 2021 financial results. I have a motion that report TR 1922 relating to the 2021 financial results be received for information. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Wookey.
Questions or comments? Councillor Rymal.
I just want to make a comment on this for when the future council, when you go to look at budget. I think it's impressive that the police were able to keep their variance to 0. And it's a very tough thing. And, you know, just tonight, you know, and I know Chief Gregory, you're just getting started with the fire, you know, to be able to look at the budget, but, you know, the fire was 584,000 over. And we already know we're having a 606,000 pumper, you know, added in a big cost. But one of the things when you're, you know, when we're looking at police in the future, budgets is, you know, the need for police services in the community, but when you won't see big capital costs, and that's one of the things I found surprising when looking at the police budget, you don't see capital costs for cars. They always include them in their operating costs. I don't know how they continue to maintain that throughout their budgets, but you don't see a lot of huge capital costs for police, but yet they still maintain their budget and are still, as I say, a variance of 0. So I find that commendable, but it is certainly a challenge to try to provide the police services that are needed.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Councillor Clark.
I just wonder if staff could comment on the long-term debt, just in terms of whether we're in a good place, whether or not we could take on more. We're looking at new projects. I'm just wondering what kind of ratio or what kind of comparison we have with other municipalities our size.
Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you. We're not in a really bad situation. The comparison in a few weeks when the budget comes forth, there'll be comparators in there so we can see where we are with other municipalities. We're not, debt isn't really hurting us really badly right now, but we don't want to take on any debt where we don't have to. So yeah, there'll be more information coming in a few weeks on when the draft budget is presented.
Is the increase in interest rates we've seen over the last little while? I mean, I recognize it has an effect, but what's the effect on the size of our budget?
Well, the inflation more, the interest rates our debentures are all locked in at a certain rate, so they don't affect us at all.
But future ones would be at a higher interest rate.
Yeah, and they're locked in for the whole term of the debenture. So if it's a 25-year, that interest rate is locked in all the way. So the increase in interest rates isn't affecting us.
Okay. Councillor Baldwin stands back to you, Councillor Clark.
Well, I thank Councillor Clark and you for your questions. Mine is related. On page 69, when you talk about external debt, is there a possibility we could get an extra line in there, the debt retirement date of those projected projects? Is that a possibility on this?
We could do that in the budget time, is that, or do you want something sooner?
Not necessarily today. If it's in budget, fine, but just as on a one pager, it's always nice to see the debt retirement date when you see it in the chart form.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you. I'm glad you'll be able to provide us with some comparisons through the budget process. I just was wondering, is there kind of a ratio based on the size of your budget? Is there a percentage that is recommended for long-term or external debt, or is it just up to each municipality to make those individual decisions?
Well, there is definitely areas where you want to stay in percentage wise. Off the top of my head, I don't have that information, but again, that'll come out in the budget process. we'll provide more information on debt around there and where we stand in comparison. There's no regulations on it besides the allowable debt, which is really high, which we wouldn't even want to approach. So yeah, it's just where you feel comfortable with, where council feels comfortable with, but we'll see comparators to other municipalities.
Further questions? Seeing none? Is there a motion on this? Yes, then all in favor? Are there any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to the electronic monitoring policy. I have a motion that report TR 2022 relating to the electronic monitoring policy be received for information. And further, the council approve the electronic monitoring policy as attached to report TR 2022. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments on the report? Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Is this unique to St. Thomas, or do a lot of other municipalities do this?
I think we've all been asked to do it. Mr. Treasurer, is that where we're at?
Thank you. Yeah, this is a mandate from the province, I believe.
Oh, so that's
All
fine.
municipalities have to do it.
Yep, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next item relates to community grants for the period up to October 2022. I have a motion that report TR 2122 relating to community grants be received for information, and further the council concur with administration's review of the applications received, and further the council approve the community grant request from the St. Thomas Panthers Girls Hockey Association in the amount of $1,895. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, second by Councillor Rymo.
Questions or comments? Councillor Clark?
Just what's left in that account now after we take this out?
Do we have an answer for that? As to
I'm not sure. It'll be in the area of $15,000.
Can I ask on this one? This is we let someone use a room. Do we give the money to the Parks Department or the arena as part of this grant, or do we just rewrite that off? Do we accept the loss? What, maybe a better way to put it.
No, there is the revenue.
We transfer the money.
It would come out of grants and go to revenue and Parks Department.
Super. And we're not losing revenue from a rental point of view for the places that we're doing it. Okay, thank you. Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. Is grant money carried over from year to year, or do we start fresh?
Yeah, in the last couple of years, we haven't had many grants, so we did carry the money ahead. A lot of times that money is already used up, but we've had some money left over and we'll carry it forward for a couple of years.
Okay. Further questions on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members, council will now reconvene into regular session. I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole, as recorded in the minutes of this date, be confirmed, ratified, and adopted. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Rymo.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
No reports of committees this evening. Next, we move into petitions and communications. First item relates to an application for a liquor license by Wild Wing at 1025 Talbot Street, being made to the Alcohol and Gaming Association of Ontario. Council may make representation to the commission concerning the application. Next item is correspondence received from the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism regarding the 2023 Ontario Volunteer Service Awards. The deadline for nominations is November 15th, 2022. And next item is a letter received from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing regarding the More Homes Built Faster Ontario's Housing Supply Action Plan for 2022 to 2023. The last item under petitions is notice
Councillor,
received.
Peters?
Your worship, just on this core piece of correspondence, are we going to have some further discussion about this down the road? I know we've got a Conservation Authority meeting Wednesday, and it's a topic of discussion and urgent discussion at the Conservation Authority as to what's being proposed here. So I just, for a future meeting, hopefully we can have something consolidated from other affected bodies, just to understand the implications of this.
I see Mr. Pompili has popped up, and he and I had this discussion earlier this week or late last week about how will this affect us? And Lou, I'll let you answer the question as to when we may bring back a report to council.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Councillor Peters. I will be giving a high level as part of the council orientation packet presentation tomorrow. I'll give a very high level outline of what's included in the bill. And we'll follow that up at a future council meeting with a more comprehensive report in terms of what the impacts of that bill would be on some of the services that we provide here in the city.
Okay. Great. Other questions on that topic? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Pompili.
Your worship, the last item under petitions is notice received from the Ontario Energy Board regarding an application by Enbridge Gas to change natural gas rates effective January 1st, 2023 to recover costs associated with the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act and the Ontario Emissions Performance Standards. Your worship, unless there are any items from the members under this area, we'll now move into unfinished business of council. And seeing no items from the members, we'll now move into new business of council. Your worship, no items from the members. We'll now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws. Moved by Councillor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing that, all in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
I have a motion by Councillor Baldwin-Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing that, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
First bylaw, please.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on the 7th day of November, 2022.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
The next 6 bylaws relate to a purchase of service agreement under the Canada-wide Early Learning Childcare Program. The second bylaw is an agreement or a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and St. Thomas Cooperative Nursery School.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
Third bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Tiny Tots Cooperative Nursery School of Aldborough, Inc.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
The fourth bylaw is bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Milestones Children's Center.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is passed. Next bylaw.
Fifth bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of corporation to an agreement between the city and YMCA of Southwestern Ontario.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
The sixth bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of corporation to a certain agreement between the city and YWCA of St. Thomas Elgin.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
Seventh bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Next to Mom, Inc.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
The eighth bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city, Donald Black McKeag, and 1767158 Ontario, Inc. This relates to a site plan agreement for miniature golf course at 79 to 83 Elm Street.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
Ninth bylaw is a bylaw to temporarily remove certain lands from part lot control. This includes parts 10 to 14 on Plan 11R 10928 on Lexington Court.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Next bylaw, please.
10th bylaw is a bylaw to adopt official plan amendment number 104 to the City of St. Thomas official plan. This relates to residential use at 11 Manitoba Street.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Last bylaw, please.
11th and final bylaw is a bylaw to amend bylaw 50-88, being the zoning bylaw for the City of St. Thomas, relating to residential use at 11 Manitoba Street.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried. Your worship, I rise and report the successful passing of 11, I say 11 bylaws.
I have a motion by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the 11 bylaws be received and adopted. The same be read a third time, engrossed, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Next, we move into public notice. One notice that administration intends to introduce a report at the November 14th, 2022 council meeting requesting an adjustment to the health recruitment budget in order to facilitate the recruitment of additional family physicians into the area. No notices of motion. Your worship, there is a need to move into closed session. I have a motion that the meeting be closed to deal with a personal matter about identifiable individuals, a proposed or pending acquisition of land, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Burgess.
Thank you very much. Before we vote, the same news as every other week. We'll be moving into closed session now. We will return only to adjourn the meeting for the day. So those of you watching us at home, thank you for doing so tonight. For those of you in the audience, thank you for joining us tonight. And we will now vote on the motion to go into closed session. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. We'll give a couple minutes.